My name's Jeremy Channon. I'm the new Corporate and Commercial Solicitor at MJP Law here on Wimborne. As I said, why are we here today? I've done a few corporate transactions, business sales so far. Business owner will come and speak to me and he'll say to me, right, I've negotiated the deal, I've agreed how much is going to be paid, we've agreed the deal structure, I've given him the accounts, I've given him the paperwork that's necessary. We just need you to come in and hopefully in 2 or 3 weeks put in the sale agreement. It shouldn't cost too much because I've done most of the work myself. How much is it going to cost? And that's literally about as much information as I get. And I say, well, how long is a piece of string? So what I do is I give them a business sale questionnaire. Any business owner who's selling the business will generally be given a business sale questionnaire by the purchaser's solicitors. So by the business owner completing that for me, it gives me an insight into the business as to what I'm dealing with, and it also often helps identify some of the issues that I have to deal with. That gives me a better idea. So in the dark, it gives me a better idea of what I might be dealing with and the costs involved. Once I have a better idea of what we're going to be dealing with, it enables me to give hopefully a fixed price quote on how much it's going to cost to do the deal. That's generally influenced by the number of issues that have been identified in the size of the business and how complicated the business is. So I've mentioned already the business sale questionnaire that goes across, and I've said about it helping fix the fee. Often, as I said, the questionnaire will ask questions about different aspects of the business. It will touch on employees, it will touch on the commercial property, your business premises. It will also go into any licenses you hold with the local authority or with any regulatory authorities. It will also touch on any intellectual property you have licenses for or own, which is key to the business. So there are a number of different areas are covered. Once we've identified these issues, you've got a choice. You can then have a go at dealing with them in advance or leaving them in place if that's possible, and then the purchaser will normally knock you on the purchase price as a result. I often encourage the business owners to be as upfront as possible, because the disclosure process often results in a lot of these issues being brought to the front. And to the extent you try and hide them, the sale agreement that's put in place will contain warranties. And these are warranties which are assurances you as a buyer are giving to the seller as to the state of the business. If at a later stage something comes out that assurance hasn't been true, then normally the buyer will have a claim against you afterwards. So you're going to lose either way. You either sort it out in advance and pay to have it sorted out, or it's going to cost you later on. With the warranties, if there have been issues identified, what you might often find is that the purchaser will say, right, we're not quite so happy with the business. They'll look to hold some money back as a retention, so that we don't trust you completely, that you've been fully honest with us. And so we're expecting for there to be some problems with the business, so we're going to hold part of the purchase price back. And then if there are issues, we can claim money back from that. And if after a certain period of time, a year, 2 years, there haven't been any issues, then that money will be released at a later stage. There are a number of different ways to skin this cat. The reason I've got this photo here, there we are, that's my father with Jamie, crew member. The thing about Jamie, which is different in the fishing business from most companies, is that Jamie's not actually an employee. He's a self-employed chair fisherman. So when Dad comes up to offloading the business, he doesn't have to worry about Jamie too much. If you're a company with employees and you're selling the business to a purchaser, the purchaser is going to have a direct interest in what the situation is with regards to those employees. So here's a classic example. I've sent the questionnaire off to the business owner. He's come back and the section dealing with employees and the employee contracts has been pretty much left blank. So I said to the seller, I said, I think you've missed out this section, I think you've forgotten forgotten to fill it in. And he said to me, Jerry, so we don't have to worry about the employment contracts and the employees too much because I don't have any employment contracts. Stop the bus. So I said, I take it your employees have worked for more than 2 months, and they've been with the business for a very long time. And I said, do you realise you're legally obliged to provide your employees with contracts? And he said, no, I didn't realise that. I said, well, we should perhaps think about putting some employment contracts in place. And he said, if the purchaser wants to give them employment contracts, then he can do that. And I said, well, there's a couple of issues here. One, because you don't have employment contracts in place, there's a potential liability. Because there's a potential liability, you might find that the sale price is not. And secondly, the purchaser is going to want to know what he's taking on in terms of employees, i.e. how much he's paying them, how much holiday pay they're entitled to, any other fringe benefits. And as the purchaser on 2P, he's obliged to protect their position. So he's got to know what their position is. So what we did in the end, we did put some basic employment contracts in place, and he paid, the client, who was the seller, paid us a sum. Because it had been identified in the business questionnaire up front, we were able to quantify the cost of fixing that. So it was an additional cost, but a fixed cost on top of what he originally agreed to pay us for the business sale documentation. But it did have an impact in as much as not only did he have to pay us to put the employment contracts in place, but the purchaser reduced how much they are willing to pay for the business. Because they said, even though they've got employment contracts now, there might be a liability later on because those employment contracts weren't in place beforehand. And I think I touched on this before. Again, a picture of our product. There is no IP or licenses or patent protection for lobsters, but there is a brand there, and people come down, they buy Dorset crab and Dorset lobster, and there's value in that. We can't protect that. You as a business owner might have something which can be protected, a trade name, or you might have a process you use which is capable of being of patent protection. There is value in that as well. So not only is it worth your while protecting it, but if you're going to be selling at a later date, it's additional value for your business. Business premises. Now I touched on this. In terms of my father's scenario, we have, as I said, fishing grounds that sit from Durlston down to the Clavell Tower, up to 1.5 miles out. For us as fishermen, we don't have any legal entitlement to our fishing grounds. The way it works is there's a certain number of fishermen who work out of pool, who have the licenses which enable them to fish, and it's gentleman's agreement. Everyone tends to work their own grounds. You know your own grounds, you know how to work them, so people say, what's to stop someone else from coming into work where we fish? It's a different water depth, it's subject to different tides, and it's a different seabed. So when we come to sell the business, our fishing grounds or our business premises don't form part of any of the value of the business. For businesses based on the shore, that's often not going to be the case. So a key question is, when the purchaser comes in, they're going to want to know, depending on the nature of your business, your location might be key to the value of the business. I.e. there's been a jewellery shop in this particular location in town for a while, people know that that's where you go to get jewellery from. So again, another example, same situation, handed the questionnaire across, it came back, and there wasn't much information given with regards to the business premises. And I said, well, obviously for the purchaser it's important that they have this particular location. Do you own the freehold on the premises? Do you have a lease? We're going to need the details for this. And he came back and said, no, we're actually in under a tenancy at will. So they could be kicked out at any stage. And he said, it's not a problem. He'd already started negotiating, he'd already had the seller in place. And he came, he said, well, it's fine, we'll sort it out, the landlady. As soon as the landlady got air of what was going on, she said, well, she'd basically been sleeping. And she said, no, well, now I think about it, I want the premises back. So suddenly you've got a massive problem. You've got business premises which they have no right to remain in. Whereas if they'd actually thought about it in advance and he'd spoken to the landlady before he'd agreed the deal, there's a good chance that he'd be able to perhaps secure a lease on the premises, so when he came to selling the business, he had an asset that could be transferred. And this is a point I've touched on before. So I did spend 2 years working as a company commercial solicitor, working as a fisherman, but my background is a company commercial solicitor. What I've found from my experiences working down here is that there are a lot of firms have company commercial solicitors, but what they actually are people who during the last downturn were conveyancers or commercial property people who turned their hand to doing some company commercial work. So I've spent a long time working, building up an expertise in business and commercial matters. I don't deal with commercial property, but I have a colleague that does. I'm glad to see I've actually managed to prove that I can spell solicitor correctly. Having the right solicitor on board with the relevant expertise can help the deal go proceed a lot more smoothly. What you'll find with a company commercial solicitor is not only that they have the relevant expertise, but we're not litigious natured, we're not adversarial. So you'll find if you've got two company commercial solicitors working on either side of the transaction, they will actually they'll work together to help maintain the relationship between the buyer and seller. Often you'll find on a business exit that the seller is not leaving the business immediately. There might be an earn-out, or they might be returned as consultants. So often preserving that relationship between the two parties is key, and part and parcel of that is having someone who knows what they're doing. I found myself involved with a transaction with an ex-conveyancer, and they're very much formulaic and procedural in the way they work, and it became quite point scoring in a couple of points. Didn't really want to work through it, just wanted to prove how great he was. It wasn't that great, but his conversation with his client worked in a way where it effectively alienated himself from the other side. So key to have the relevant expertise on board. Or working towards hopefully a successful outcome at the end. So just helping the transaction proceed smoothly is one of the key things that we hope to do at the end. So thank you very much everyone for coming along today.